welcome to People Like Us, a podcast for and about third culture kids everywhere. I'm Jen Mohindra. I'm also a TCK, and I have a Facebook group for TCK adults called, unsurprisingly, People Like Us. Good morning, and on today's episode of People Like Us, I'm delighted to have Carolina Travaglio with me. Welcome, Carolina. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great.
How are you today? Calling from Valencia in Spain.
Yes, I am. We're having very nice weather here. I'm happy to be here. It's the place to be with the beach. Yeah.
Nice. So, as usual, I'm going to jump straight into our TCK discussion. And first question, though it's become standard now, is tell me, where did you grow up?
Yeah, typical question. And always interesting to answer, although a little bit difficult. Yeah. So I consider like me growing up until like 18, more or less, because during all those years, the places I've lived in were determining to what I have become as an adult. So I was first born in Venezuela, but I was really young when I moved to Europe. I was 1.5 years old. I'm the youngest in my family, so my brother and sister were 4 and 5. But so I really didn't know much of Venezuela or nothing at all when I left Venezuela. We went to France because my dad was studying a PhD, and we all moved there, and we had a really nice time during 3.5 years. We traveled a lot around Europe, and my mom and dad, they really loved the experience. And since then, like, France became the reference for the kind of culture that they admire. And then after the PhD, we were supposed to go back to Venezuela, but my mom was like, hey, let's try to pass by some place where they speak English so the kids learn good English. And so my dad got a position in the US, and so we went there. It was shorter, it was 1.5 years. But of course, every year counts when you're growing up. When I was 7 and went back actually to Venezuela, I had lived more than half my life abroad. So it was strange. I was still very young, and I wasn't like completely able to grasp the difference, but I already felt like there was something that I didn't belong to. That was strange. Also, my family, I didn't quite know them except for my grandmother that visited us really often. I knew that my parents were really nice to these people and they hugged them and it was like very familiar. So I gave into it. I was more confident and trusted the fact that my parents were happy about those people, but I didn't really know them. So that was sort of particular. But so then I lived in Venezuela for around 12 years, which is the longest. And I did my teenage years there. And even though at first I spent a year in the French international school, so to speak, French/international. Then I went to a Venezuelan school because my parents wanted us to learn about Venezuelan history, and it was also a Catholic school, so they wanted that side because they knew that we were already like a bit of outsiders and that would integrate us a little bit more. But it wasn't the same case for my brother though. He stayed at the French school and like it was another story. But in any case, I was there, and when I was 18, I moved to China for a year. So that was definitely like the eye-opener for the rest of the world. That was just an amazing experience, and I counted in for when I was a kid, and that what made me a third culture kid, because I think it was very like different from everything else, like different from Western culture, of course.
Oh. That's a lot of moving. So you had moves within the countries. You mentioned going back to Venezuela and then having a year in a French school and then moving to a Venezuelan school. What was that like for you?
Well, the school system changed a lot between all those different environments. For example, one thing I remember very, it was not traumatic, but I mean, it was really confusing because I learned I learned to read and speak French.
Mhm.
Well, read basically, read and write French before I learned to read and write in Spanish, which is my mother tongue. So my mom taught me at home, and so I learned to write in French calligraphy, and so that was okay because my mother didn't have anything against that. But
Mhm.
when I went to the States, there they wanted me to write in separate letters, so not cursive, but like their standard kind of um, separate letters kind of
Sure.
writing. And the teacher just didn't let me write in cursive because that was something that we were supposed to do in fourth grade, and I was in kindergarten. And so my mom, she decided to let me like do some exercises at home where I wrote in the two kind of handwritings and then did a drawing. Um, and then when I went to back to Venezuela, I was in French school, so that was fine. But then when I started primary school in the Catholic school, they wanted me to write with Palmer script handwriting,
Uh-huh.
and the nuns didn't let me at all to use the other script. And I was like, but I already know how to write. How come
Yeah.
this has to be changed? I was really like, it is the same. Why would this be a problem? And obviously culturally it also changed a lot. The way I was taught in kindergarten in the US was very different to what I could expect from this French school, or what my parents had seen from the French system, because they knew that my brother and sister had gone through that since they're older, and they would admire one things more than others. And yeah, um it was also surprising how it had to be so structured and square when I was already having like a more flexible kind of thinking. And
Mhm.
the nuns didn't want to change, and the other school teacher in the US either. And it was quite hard to wrap my head around that. And then later on, when I was already in high school, that they kind of they let you write in your own way finally.
Finally.
I created my own way of writing, and it's until today it's a really particular thing that I have. It's like me being free
Yeah.
to express myself in a particular way that I like. So yeah, it changes a lot from one place to the other, even in Western countries.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a frustrating experience. How did you get on with the kids at school in terms of fitting in, having sort of come from different places and being back in your home country and having been away?
Well, it was more or less okay. I don't really remember a time where it was very difficult or anything. It took me a bit of adjusting in the customs and the way of uh, thinking and doing things. My parents tried. There was a good balance between the fact that they have a European mindset and the fact that they are quite Venezuelan as well. So we were taught both. Um, so I think that they helped us channel a little bit both worlds, or more than both, um, in order for us to integrate. And the languages weren't a problem because also I learned so young to speak English, Spanish, and French. So
Mm.
that was a good thing, yeah, to not be an outsider. For example, for my brother and sister, since they moved around when they were older, there was a bit more of a gap between the kids.
Hmm.
Fortunately, I didn't have that.
Sure, sure. You mentioned coming back to Venezuela and not being so close to your grandparents, which makes sense because you hadn't lived there. What was that like?
Um, yeah, in the beginning, it was quite surprising. I I was supposed to have a bigger family, although when I was coming from the States and France, extended families are not typical. So
Hmm.
um, like the fact of having many uncles and cousins wasn't a notion that I was used to.
Yeah,
But at the same time, it was very nice to have like this group of people surrounding us and being loved, and that was a nice feeling. And I trusted my parents for them to be there with us, and um, so I did like it like very quickly. Yeah, although I was confused,
yeah.
it was very nice. Like, and they did keep in touch during those years, but it's not like today where you have FaceTime. And for example, I have my nephews. They are twins and they live in Austria at the moment.
Hmm.
And we FaceTime with them like once, twice, or even three times a week. And we read to them, and they know us, even though they're 3 years old. Like they really know who we are. And when we go visit, it's like, hey, here's Auntie, and it's very nice to where we're also raising TCKs on their case as well. And um, you can also see the difference with the families today and the families then, all because of communications and thanks to all the technology that we have. Maybe if we would have had it back then, it would have been easier. But I did have a lot of contact with my grandmother at the time because she visited us quite often every time she could, and spent a lot of time with us.
It's interesting what you mentioned about the change in technology and how that's changed how we as TCKs can keep in touch with people. I was talking about this just yesterday in terms of having moved around and not having Facebook and things like that. So it was writing letters back then, and now it's kind of easier with Facebook and FaceTime and stuff, as you mentioned, but I think there's other pressures that go with that too. Do you find that you've kept in touch with people from the different places you've lived in? I appreciate you were quite young when you were in France and the USA.
Well, no, it's surprising that I did I have kept in touch with some of those people. Also because some of them are daughters or sons of friends of my parents. So for
Okay.
my parents to keep in touch with them, and then I know what the kids are doing, and so we keep in touch as well. It's
Oh, nice.
funny because at a certain point there was a friend of mine. We went to preschool together in France, and at a certain point, she got a scholarship to go to Hong Kong for a UWC college, and that was great. And then another friend of mine, that we have the same system of scholarships in Venezuela because we have that. UWC works like everywhere or close to everywhere in the world. And so I was involved with that, and a friend of mine went to Hong Kong as well in a scholarship. And that year I was living in China, and we are like, okay, let's go to Hong Kong and visit. And so in the same school, I knew this girl from France and this guy from Venezuela. And people were really surprised, like, how come these two people that come from two different countries, how
Yeah.
is it that you know both? It was a really funny coincidence. But otherwise, like, there's this other I remember this Dutch girl. We lived together at the same time in Minnesota, and we were really like completely different looking people. She was tall and blonde, and of course quite white, and I'm more brown and shorter and dark hair. And
Mhm.
so it was really funny. I remember having so much fun together. And I did find her on Facebook because we had her last name on a Christmas card that we kept from Christmas. And I did find her, and we chatted a little bit, but it's not like
Mhm.
we were able to relive the same relationship of friendship that we had when we were six,
Sure,
7.
sure.
So yeah, it was harder. But friends that I have from China, like a lot of them, I still talk to. It's quite nice. It's a very good tool that we have with Facebook
Yes.
and Instagram. Yes.
So you mentioned China at 18. There was also talk of Minnesota, and now you're in Valencia. So it sounds like you've kept up the TCK traveling.
Yes, I have. Well, in the next 10 years, I moved, I'm not sure how many times also.
Yeah.
So after China, I went back to Venezuela and started my studies there, my university studies in architecture. And so every time I got the chance to make an exchange program, I did it. And also I went to Paris because my parents wanted me to study abroad because the situation in Venezuela is so complicated. But I didn't stay because I really didn't find a place for myself. It was quite hard. So I went back. But then later on, I went to Milan and came back, and and then I moved definitely to Europe. Like definitely, I mean in the sense that I couldn't go back home to Venezuela, which in itself was a very difficult transition. And now I'm in Valencia. So in the last 10 years, I also moved a lot, and it has also been a different kind of journey when you do this as a young adult that I consider myself to be.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's also it's a lifestyle in a way, and
Mm.
and it's not always understood um, by other people. Like you're supposed to settle. It's a typical thing to do, but it's hard for us to settle, right? So yeah.
It can be, yes. So what makes somewhere feel like home for you?
Well, it's a lot about family. I wish that we could be like all together and be able to have lunch or dinner together, spend some afternoon with the kids, and just share a little bit of time and be able to have just them in the neighborhood instead of just going to visit and have like a very intense time with intensive time
Mm.
together. It's a completely different feeling. Although I loved visiting my sister in Vienna. Um, but yeah, I mean where people are, and in a sense also where things are culturally diverse. Like whenever I lived in a big city, I also kind of feel at home because it feels like I can nurture myself from all these kind of other cultures. And um, so that feeling of being on the move and and sharing with different kinds of people, that also feels like home because it's what I've been doing. um, so staying put, maybe unless I have relationships and strong friendships to have as a reference, maybe being on the move is rather a sense of home. But it's for sure it's a it's a difficult thing to define because um, it's never been really a place. And for me, home was for a long time, it was Venezuela because my parents were there. My
Mhm.
parents are in Valencia. And because they were there, I felt that I could come back. Like
Yeah.
in the past few years, I say like, oh, I went to Milan, and then I came back, and then when I finally moved to Brussels, my parents also left Venezuela again for the situation, and that's the moment when I said like, wow, it's that was like taking the ground beneath my feet. It was a different feeling. Um, so in a sense, that's a big reference as well, where my parents are at the time, or yeah, or siblings as well.
So I'm hearing it's very much about family, about people, and where there is cultural diversity, as in people who you can relate to that get your mobile lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
your sister lives in Austria. So have your siblings also kept up the sort of moving lifestyle?
Well, we all moved away from Venezuela. Like only not only my siblings, but also about half my cousins and some of my uncles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes, they depends, no, because for example, my sister married a Canadian,
Uh-huh.
so her kids are like 100% TCK. There's no way around it. They're
Yeah.
halfies, and were born in Vienna, and they will for sure move again because their dad is in scientific research, and they will continue to learn languages, and they are right now learning Spanish, English, and Dutch, and not Dutch, German.
Germany.
Um, um, so yeah, they're 100% TCKs, and my brother, he's living in France, but he married a Venezuelan girl,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's a little bit different, and they do seem to be staying there. So it's more a bit of question of immigration. I think there's a fine line between the two, like being an immigrant and being a TCK. I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that the immigrant experience can be a TCK experience, but it's a lot about the feeling that the person has and how they relate with in home and out of home, and if they effectively do a third culture between those two. So we'll see. We'll see if they're having a baby boy, if he's gonna be also a TCK or not, or half a TCK. We don't
That's
we don't
exciting.
know.
Another on the way.
Yeah.
So, having lived in a lot of different places, where do you feel the most foreign?
Um, well, definitely in China, I would have to say. I mean, it's more or less the obvious answer because
Mm-hmm.
I come from such a different place,
Yeah.
and like Chinese culture is such a thing to explore and get into, and having to more or less make an effort, even though it's not a bad or difficult effort, but you have to really like want to dig into that because it doesn't come easily. Even if you're there, it's very easy to stay in the expat community and not really like expand from there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I do feel really foreign, but at the same time, it's once you begin to speak the language, people are quite receptive, and they do let you or they try to let you understand certain things. But I think it would take me so long to really grasp the culture, and I would love to do that if I had the chance to live a long time in Beijing. But yeah, otherwise, because Europe and the States feels so relatable to me. Like
Mm.
obviously, American culture is everywhere, with especially with media, and European culture as well. Since my parents think a lot in that way, and my half my family is also Italian, so it's it's very much present in my daily life. So I would have to say China
For
in a
sure.
fun way,
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
really fun way.
I hear you. So what's next then? Obviously, we're restricted with travel because as we're recording this, it's during COVID time. But what do you see next after Valencia, assuming that there will be another move?
Of course, I would love it to change a little bit soon enough. What's next? I don't know. I'm not sure. What I would love to do is move to a bigger city and again have like a more cultural contact with people, and a place that is more like a hub of that takes me to other places. I had that a lot when I was living in Brussels. I mean, since so
Mhm.
many the airport takes you to so many places.
Yeah,
Um, so I would love to live in London. That's my dream right now. I don't know. I have a fixed will to live there, but it could be any other place. I mean, it has surprised me before that I'd never thought that I would move to Beijing.
mhm.
When I did, it was completely out of the blue, and that was an amazing experience. So who knows? Maybe I move to Melbourne or to I don't know, Buenos Aires, and it ends up like being a wonderful experience. Who knows? Like, and I'm really open to any of that. Like, I guess any TCK would be to just jump in, right?
That's brilliant, having such an open mind to be able to think that, yeah, you could go and try living anywhere. Carolina, we're almost out of time. As usual, it's flown by, and I like to finish on a positive note. So, if you'd like to tell me about one of the best, or if not the best thing that you think about being a TCK.
Well, I think there are a lot of good things. There are certainly difficult things, but since we're
Mm.
talking about a positive note,
Sure.
for me, the greatest part is the high the heightened in ability of being creative. I
Mm.
think we are taught, or we come to have an education where we have to see things from many different perspectives because we have to relate to other people that are coming from different places, and so that allows us to actually be able to consider so many points of view, right? And when you do that, you get to do a mesh um, of different lifestyles and just create something that is different, that is surprising, that is not usual, because it has never been done. Like what we do is just um is out of the ordinary. So and being creative is doing just that, like doing something from scratch that brings together a lot of different things. And I love that, and I see that in a lot of TCKs. Like, even if you aren't in a creative field, they're able to think in creative ways, and I love that. It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because we've, in a way, grown up outside of the box, so we're able to think creatively as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Carolina, it's been so interesting speaking with you today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It has been great.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for listening to People Like Us. If you'd like to join an online community full of people like us, hop over to Facebook and search for People Like Us. You'll find my group, and you're very welcome to join us.